This is one of the calmest paintings Vincent van Gogh ever created. At least, that's how it appears at first. A quiet river, a few stars, lights reflected on the water, a couple walking in the distance. Nothing seems threatening. Nothing seems disturbing. And yet, the longer you spend looking at this painting, the less peaceful it begins to feel. The painting is called The Starry Night over the Rhone. Van Gogh painted it in 1888, shortly after moving to Arles in the south of France. At the time, he believed he had finally found the perfect place for his art. More light, more color, more intensity. The South seemed to offer everything he had been searching for. But there's something important that often goes unnoticed. Van Gogh was not simply looking for beautiful landscapes. He was looking for a new way of seeing the world. And perhaps no part of that world fascinated him more than the night. In one of his letters, he wrote something unusual. He said that the night was more alive and more richly colored than the day itself. It is a strange statement because most of us think of night as an absence of light, an absence of color, an absence of detail. But for Van Gogh, night seemed to work differently. It did not hide things, it transformed them. That obsession helps explain why this painting exists. In the late 19th century, most artists painted night scenes from memory, sketches, or imagination. Van Gogh wanted something different. He wanted the real night, the real darkness, the real reflections, the real stars. He wanted to capture the experience of being there, standing beneath the sky itself rather than reconstructing it later from memory. And that decision would shape some of the most remarkable paintings of his career. Van Gogh was so determined to paint the night directly that stories about his methods became almost as famous as the paintings themselves. One of the most persistent claims is that he attached candles to his straw hat so he could continue working after sunset. Whether that story is entirely true remains uncertain. What is certain is that Van Gogh was fascinated by the challenge of painting directly at night, often working under the glow of the newly installed gaslights of Arles. And suddenly, the image behind this painting becomes much easier to imagine. A man standing alone beside the Rhone River, watching reflections shift across the water, trying to capture light before it changed, trying to paint a night that refused to stay still. And there is another detail that makes this even more remarkable. The sky we see here was not simply invented. Van Gogh was observing a real night sky above Arles. Researchers who later compared the painting with astronomical records found that several of the stars appear in positions consistent with what could actually have been seen from the riverbank at that time. Not every detail matches perfectly, but enough of them do to reveal something important. Van Gogh was not merely imagining this scene. He was studying it, observing it, and then transforming it into something deeply personal. Now look at the stars, not just for a second. Really look at them. None of them seem to be there simply to fill empty space. Van Gogh makes each one demand attention. The glowing halos surrounding them are so intense that they almost stop feeling like distant points of light. They seem closer than they should, and that changes the entire atmosphere of the scene. But there's something curious. Despite all those stars shining above the city, the sky does not completely dominate the painting. If you pay attention long enough, your eyes eventually drift somewhere else, to the river. And that is strange, because normally it would be the stars that capture all of our attention. But here, the reflections seem to compete for that role. Look only at the reflections. Ignore the sky for a moment. The city lights descend into the water in long golden streaks. At first, they look like ordinary reflections. Beautiful, nothing more. But keep looking. The lines do not fall smoothly. They break. They tremble. Some of them seem almost fragmented, as if the water is transforming whatever it reflects. After a while, the reflections begin to feel more important than the lights themselves. It is a difficult sensation to explain, but it happens almost as if the river is competing with the city, as if the reflected version of reality is drawing more attention than reality itself. And perhaps this is exactly where something changes. the painting stops feeling like a landscape and begins to feel like an experience. There is an obvious calmness in this scene. That much is undeniable. The colors are soft. The river appears still. The couple walks without urgency. Nothing suggests danger. Nothing suggests conflict. But there is a difference between calmness and peace. And the longer you look, the harder it becomes to believe they are exactly the same thing. Perhaps that has something to do with the moment in Van Gogh's life when this painting was created. Today, it is almost impossible to talk about him without thinking about his mental struggles. But when this work was painted, the most famous episodes of his life had not yet happened. The major crisis was still ahead of him. The hospital was still ahead of him. The incident that would forever become associated with his name was still ahead of him. And that is part of what makes this painting so intriguing. When we look at it today, we do so with knowledge that Van Gogh himself did not yet possess. We know where the story ends. He did not. And perhaps that is why the painting seems to exist in such a strange place between stability and uncertainty. Only a few months later, Van Gogh would enter into conflict with Paul Gauguin, a French painter who had moved to Arles to live and work alongside him. For a time, Van Gogh believed the two of them could build a community of artists together. More than a shared studio, it was a dream, a place where artists could live, create, and inspire one another. But the relationship quickly deteriorated. Arguments became frequent. Tension grew, and the outcome would eventually become one of the most famous episodes in the history of art. It was during that period that Van Gogh suffered a severe mental crisis and mutilated part of his own ear. That is why so many historians pay special attention to this painting, because it was created shortly before all of that happened. And inevitably, a question emerges. When we look at this image today, are we simply looking at a peaceful night? Or are we looking at signs of something that was only beginning to take shape? There is another detail that makes all of this even more interesting. Van Gogh wrote constantly to Theo, his younger brother, his closest friend, the person who supported him financially when almost nobody was buying his paintings. Much of what we know about Van Gogh's thoughts comes from those letters. And in one of them, he made a comment that changes the way we look at this painting. Van Gogh wrote that perhaps, if his paintings contained more calmness like this one, people would finally begin to appreciate his work. At first glance, it sounds like a simple comment about art. But the more you think about it, the stranger it becomes, because the painting really does seem calm. Yet, that calmness never feels completely effortless. It feels constructed, like something that requires work to maintain. And suddenly, the painting begins to feel less like a view of a river and more like an attempt to create peace. Perhaps that is why the couple at the bottom of the composition is so important. Many people move through the entire painting without noticing them. The stars attract attention. The reflections attract attention. The city attracts attention. But the couple is easy to miss. And yet try imagining the scene without them. The river remains. The stars remain. The reflections continue stretching across the water. And still, something disappears. The painting loses scale. It loses humanity. Without those two figures, the sky feels much larger and much lonelier. Suddenly, this is no longer a night being experienced by people. It becomes something else, something distant, something almost indifferent. It is remarkable how two tiny figures can quietly change the emotional weight of an entire painting. Look at them for a moment. They're not doing anything extraordinary. No dramatic gesture, no visible expression, no grand story unfolding before us. Just two people walking beneath an enormous sky. And perhaps that simplicity is exactly what makes them feel real, because real life rarely announces its important moments. Most of the time, it looks much more like this. There's something else that becomes noticeable when we step back and look at the painting as a whole. The city feels distant. The couple feels small, but the stars do not. The stars feel strangely close, almost too close. Normally, a brightly illuminated city would dominate a night scene. Here, the opposite happens. The sky seems more present than the earth itself. There's also a detail that many people do not realize. When we think of Van Gogh and stars, most of us immediately think of another painting, The Starry Night, the one filled with swirling skies and dramatic movement. But this painting came first, and that changes the way we see it, because here we are looking at an earlier chapter of the same fascination. The difference is striking. In The Starry Night, the sky seems almost restless. It twists, it surges, it overwhelms everything beneath it. But here, the energy is quieter, more restrained. The stars still command attention, yet the scene remains balanced. It is almost as if we are witnessing a brief moment of equilibrium before the turbulence of later works fully emerged. Perhaps that is why some art critics have suggested that the stars in Van Gogh's paintings were more than simple astronomical details. According to that interpretation, they were emotional projections, expressions of his inner world. Perhaps that is true, perhaps it is not. But after spending several minutes looking at this sky, the idea begins to feel less impossible, especially because nothing in this painting seems entirely still. Look at the water. Look at the reflections. Look at the stars. Everything appears to vibrate slightly. Not enough to feel chaotic, but enough to prevent the scene from feeling completely static. There is movement everywhere, a movement that is almost invisible. Yet once you notice it, it becomes difficult to ignore. And perhaps that is where the true fascination of the painting lies. It seems peaceful, but never completely. It seems stable, but never entirely still. It seems serene, but never fully relaxed. It is as if the entire painting exists between two emotional states, without ever choosing one completely, between calmness and unease, between contemplation and melancholy, between beauty and exhaustion. The longer you look, the harder it becomes to decide which of those emotions truly defines the scene. And perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what makes the painting so difficult to forget. Maybe that is why it continues to fascinate people more than a century later. Not because it hides a secret code, not because there is some hidden meaning waiting to be discovered, but because it captures a human feeling that is extraordinarily difficult to describe. The feeling of finding beauty in something while realizing that beauty does not completely remove unease. And perhaps the most interesting question is not what Van Gogh was seeing that night. Perhaps it is another question entirely. Why do our eyes keep returning to those reflections, to those stars that seem closer than they should, to that calmness that never feels entirely calm? The longer we look at the painting, the less it seems to be recording a night beside a river, and the more it seems to be recording a state of mind that more than a century later remains strangely easy to recognize.